Hello. Today we are going to talk about how wildfires affect the soil and how the intensity of a fire can affect the soil differently depending on how strong the fire is. So in this first slide, what you're looking at is it's showing a wildfire and it's showing the soil underneath. And the big things here that you want to see are the types of ways that we transfer heat. So we've got convection, conduction, and radiation. Convection is allowing most of that heat just to go up into the air. But for the soil, conduction and radiation are transferring heat down into the soil, and that's going to matter for what's down there. Now let's take a look at what's called burn severity. So this is how bad or how severe the fire was, and it has to do with a lot of different things. The physical makeup of the forest, what kind of biological things are living there, and ecological factors, things like moisture, things like how much sun an area gets. So a lot of things go into how severe a fire is in a specific area. In this case, we have two types of burn severity. The first is the vegetation burn severity, which is just talking about the stuff on the top. So this is your plants, grasses, trees, but also the first thin layer of leaf litter and vegetation material that was just lying on the floor of the forest. The second type of burn severity is soil burn severity. Then we start to look at what has happened in the soil. How severe was the burn in the soil? How deep did it go? What things did it affect and change within the soil? Okay, so going a little deeper into soil burn severity, there's a couple things that we look at with soil burn severity. Char depth, organic matter loss, and how the structure and color of the soil has changed. So first, let's take a look at these three images at the bottom. And on the left, we have low, and then moderate, and then high over on the right. So they're showing three different severities of soil burn. If you look at that first one, the char depth does not go very deep. You just have to scrape away a little bit of soil, and then you see fresh soil underneath. That looks totally normal. Organic matter loss, also in that first picture, there's not a lot of material that has been lost. You still see some of the dead leaves and twigs and such that are left over after the fire. They haven't been completely consumed. In the moderate image, you see less vegetation, less organic matter on the ground, and you have to scrape down a little bit further to get to a soil that we would recognize right away. And then finally, in that high severity, other than that tree that's there, you don't see anything on the ground as far as organic material, and they had to go down several inches before they even found soil that was recognizable as organic soil. All right, next up is the change in color of the soil. And the top row of pictures, we start, again, it goes low, moderate, and high. And we can see that the soil does change color, becoming more red with severity, and then eventually even more white in color. And then the soil structure, low, looks clumped up. It looks kind of rich. It has organic material in the soil. But then as you go towards the high level of severity, you can see that the soil starts to break down. It's not clumped anymore, and it just turns to ash. Everything gets burnt down to the smallest layers, the smallest bits, which is our ash. So one of the other characteristics of soil burn severity is infiltration of water. So this is water that seeps into the soil. And in the first image, it looks like normal soil, which when you put water onto the soil, it actually absorbs it really fast, really quickly, and it sinks into that soil very easily. Moderate, a little less so, takes a little bit longer. But in the high burn picture, you can see that the soil's been burnt down to such fine particles that the water just forms a drop on top. It's not absorbed by the soil at all. So there's no more infiltration of water at that point after a very high intensity fire. This slide shows a comparison of one photo taken before a fire and one photo taken after a fire. And what you'll notice is that the burn severity can change even in a small area. So we're looking at an area the size of maybe a house, ground cover wise. And you see in this first picture that we have some old logs that are on the ground, we have some grasses. But when you go over to the image B after the fire, you're going to see some different things. Some of the grass is still here, and that's because the severity, the intensity of the fire wasn't very high where the grass was, because there wasn't a lot of material to burn, and that grass was probably moist and didn't burn very intensely. But if you look at the areas where the logs were, here and here, all that area where the logs were is ash. It's white ash because those logs burned very hot. They burnt for a long time, and you can see the difference in the soil from that heat from those logs. Where if you look at an area over here right next to the logs, it's not the same color. It's a different color because there wasn't as much heat in that spot, in that location. Now lastly, we want to take a look back at infiltration. So that was the water seeping into the ground, right into soil. And good fresh soil is going to absorb a lot of water. And we remember our video from earlier in this packet, or this lesson, that was all about water and how it's absorbed by soil compared to, and soil that has vegetation growing in it, plants growing in it, compared to soil on its own. That was the video that we saw just before this assignment. Well, now we're going to link that to these forest fires, and we know that a severe forest fire, highest intensity, means that that water will no longer absorb into the ground, at least not very well. The soil gets burnt down to small particles, so the water can't get in, and as you can see in this image, the water just runs off the surface soil and takes all that dirt and debris with it. That is erosion. And you can see at this picture, even though that's not the greatest picture, after this fire, there was a tremendous amount of erosion from water running off and over the soil.